What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of He Doesn't Even Tie His Shoes Tightly. As always, I'm your host, Zach Cronin, and today we're going to be talking about the blockbuster trade that sent DeMar DeRozan to the Sacramento Kings in a sign-and trade with the Chicago Bulls. The full details of this trade include DeMar going to Sacramento, Harrison Barnes going to San Antonio, and Chris Duarte, 2 second-round picks and cash to the Chicago Bulls. This news came to me on Saturday night. I was upstate, actually upstate, also, not just upstate to us Long Islanders, at a wedding. I turned to my friend who showed me this notification, and I told him the Sacramento Kings are going to the NBA Finals. I don't think so. I was joking. I was already a glass of wine deep. I had a beer before the ceremony as well. And by the time this news dropped, I was slamming Jack and Cokes like they were my key to eternal life. I do, however, think that DeMar going to Sacramento is a fascinating trade, is a good trade overall, and one that kind of makes sense for Sacramento, although I don't know if DeMar was the right player for them. In the aftermath of this deal, the financials have come out. They are paying him about $75 million over 3 years. It is a really cost-effective trade for Sacramento. He's the third highest paid player on the roster. Oh my God, English, please. Behind Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. And still, Sacramento retains a pretty decent unit. I'm looking at their salary cap table. They still have Kevin Huerter on the roster. They still have Keegan Murray on the roster. Trey Lyles is still with the team. Keon Ellis is with them as well, and he gave them a ton of fantastic minutes down the stretch of last season, especially with Malik Monk being hurt, and he is, of course, going to come back for them next season as well. This trade does not push Sacramento over the edge. DeMar DeRozan is a fantastic player, and he's going to fit well on this team, I believe, but he doesn't fit any of the major holes that this roster has. He's not a particularly good defender. He's not a reliable three-point shooter. He is not a backup to Domantas Sabonis. Really, the only hole that he patches with the Sacramento Kings team is that he gets to the free throw line, and he's a reliable shot creator in the two-point area. DeMar last season was second in free throws made and third in free throws attempted. Sacramento as a team was, if I can recall off the top of my head, 27th in free throws made per game and 21st in free throws attempted. They were also among the bottom 5 teams in terms of two-point field goal attempts. A large reason that their offense was so dynamic was because they took and they made a lot of threes. Still, having an additional scorer, especially one who can contrast De'Aaron Fox, someone who can play in isolation, who can create from himself, whether it be in the post, in the triple threat, at the free throw line, extended. I'm not going to say that he doesn't improve this team offensively, and I'm also not one to rule out that he won't have a Jason Kidd-like revolution in terms of becoming a reliable three-point shooter. When it comes to DeRozan's reluctance to shoot threes, it's a combination of his willingness and his accuracy, although his accuracy has gotten closer and closer to the league average. It is just simply a part of his game that he does not want to expand, or that he does not feel the need to expand right now. And that could change. He's getting older. He wants to play for a title, or he wants to have the opportunity to make deep playoff runs again like he did with the Toronto Raptors. So I'm not going to rule out that he is going to remain steadfast in his opposition to shooting threes. Things could change when he arrives in training camp, when he meets with Mike Brown and the rest of the roster. Sacramento is also a victim of circumstance. If you, I can't, well, here's the thing. The Western Conference is a gauntlet. Everyone knows that. Even with the departures of Paul George going to Philadelphia, even with KCP going to Orlando, Denver took a hit with that one, and the Clippers, of course, took a hit with Paul George. There are still a bunch of great teams. You have Minnesota. You can't discount Denver because they have probably the best player in basketball right now. Who's to say that Dallas does not stay as good, or maybe even improves a little bit with their signing of Klay Thompson? And of course, you have Oklahoma City, who, at least in my estimation as of right now, is the best pick to represent the Western Conference in the finals. They are a legitimately perfect team, and they did a phenomenal job bringing in Isaiah Hartenstein, who filled really the last hole in their roster. The Kings, who finished 46-36 last season, are probably going to contend for around 50 wins. They may or may not be in the play-in. I see them right now as like a 5, 6, 7, 8 seed team, depending on, of course, what the Lakers do, depending on what happens with the Memphis Grizzlies. There are just too many variables in the Western Conference for me to be confident about this Kings team making a deep playoff run. However, I'm not going to rule out them making it to the second round or even the Western Conference Finals because anything can happen. They're really outside of Oklahoma City and maybe Minnesota. There are no clear favorites in the Western Conference. And of course, you're liable to get beat in a 7-game series. It's happened. We've seen upsets before. But overall, I think that this just makes the Kings a little bit more well-rounded as an offensive team. Doesn't really do anything for them defensively. Not that DeMar is a shit defender, but he's not elite. He is at best serviceable, I would say. I think that's a fair estimation, but who knows? Maybe having less of an offensive role will allow him to be able to dedicate more defensively because he's got great size. He's still a phenomenal athlete, even at like what, 30, 33, 34 years old. With a lot of guys who have to operate as a first or second option on a team, they just don't have the energy to dedicate to being an above average defender. We may see that with DeMar. As I already mentioned, I don't think he moves the needle for Sacramento considerably towards them being contenders. They just, to me, lack a little bit in terms of talent, even though Sabonis is a star, De'Aaron Fox is a star. I don't think that this unit pushes them into the upper echelon of Western Conference teams. I'll close it out with this thought. If you had to upgrade Harrison Barnes, DeMar is way, way ahead of Harrison Barnes in terms of raw production. DeMar averaged 24 points per game last season. Barnes averaged 12. I don't think DeMar will average 24, but that tertiary scorer that so many teams need, especially with second unit, I anticipate DeMar getting a lot of time with the second unit this season. Having somebody who can give you like 8, 10, 11 points in a 4 or 5 minute span is huge. It allows your team more breathing room, and that matters particularly against elite teams. So DeMar is a clear upgrade over Harrison Barnes in that regard. Again, I'm a little skeptical of his three-point shooting because Harry Barnes was about 39% last season. But then again, you look at some of the other shooters on this roster: Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles. Keon Ellis is going to see significantly more time for this team next season. I'm sure of it. And he shot just a shade under 42% from three last season. If you put him and DeMar in the backcourt with literally anybody the fuck else, I don't anticipate spacing being too much of an issue. Spacing is going to be a little wonky, but I think that there will be ways for them to figure something out. They may get, I want to see Mike Brown do something like silly. Put DeMar DeRozan in the dunker spot. Utilize him like Aaron Gordon or somebody, or maybe allow him to play in the low post out of the dunker spot. I think that's going to be a very, I would hope to see something silly like that. I don't know how effective it would be, but just based on DeMar's individual talents, I don't think there is going to be that much of a concern. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Drop a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. If you do any of those three things, you will become my new favorite person. And with that, I will see y'all in the next one.